Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special stream. I am here in person with Abhijit Kane. We have a very special format today. It's Ask Me Anything. So please prepare the fingers. Go ahead and stretch the fingers. You're going to be asking all the questions of Abhijit. We are meeting here in our illustrious San Francisco Postman office. So welcome everyone to the Postman stream. My name is Joyce. I'm the head of developer relations at Postman. I'm based in San Francisco. But Abhijit, you came from quite a ways away to join us. So tell us who you are and where you're from.
Sure. Thanks, Joyce. It's really exciting to be here. Looking forward to this. So, long story short, I mean, I've been here in SF for about 2 weeks. A few of us traveled from India. I think it had been about 1.5 years since we traveled.
Oh, yeah.
We do try to keep a regular travel cycle going, but I think in the midst of the epidemic, that was obviously halted for a while. So it's been really great to travel after so long and finally meet everyone here. So yeah, that's where we are.
Welcome to San Francisco, back again. And I know it's been so long since I've seen some of the folks from the Bangalore office. We already have people asking questions in the chat. So hello and welcome to the stream. We have some how to reduce memory usage. What is the future of Postman? So all those questions, except for maybe the memory usage question you'll want to answer. And then also some hiring questions. So absolutely, we are hiring always. So Abhijit, you are the head of product. You're also one of the OG founders, right? You're one of the 3 original founders of Postman.
That's right.
So maybe just give us a nutshell summary of the early beginnings of Postman. What were you doing? Why did you decide to join the company and that kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah. It's been, I think, 7 years since Postman was officially incorporated, and we started expanding what we originally set out to do. So I think for me, the story starts when I was in my sophomore year, and I was interning with Abhinav, who's our CEO now, his previous startup. And I think that was one point where we saw this need for updated tooling around APIs. After that, Abhinav and Ankit as well were working at Yahoo. I was working elsewhere, and across all of the companies we were working at, all of our friends who were working in similar spaces, I think that need became a lot more amplified. This was the time when a lot of big companies were sort of shifting from monoliths to microservices, making the need for APIs more apparent. And I think the immediate need that we saw was that the state of tooling around the API ecosystem was not where we wanted it to be. At this time, Postman existed as a small POC. It was an app on the Chrome Web Store, which is where we were for about 1.5 years or so. And that was validated by a significant number of developers. So I think in early 2014, we had around 400,000 users on the Chrome store. And I think that was one very strong piece of validation for us, because we had users from all around the world. And we were constantly receiving feedback, feature requests, etc., from all of those developers. And that was a signal that the developer community around the APIs was super strong. That was one strong signal that this was an area that we could really invest in. And I'd worked with Abhinav before. I'd enjoyed working with him, and from all the conversations that we had, it was clear that APIs are going to be super important going forward. And this problem we first started to solve once we formally started Postman was the problem of real-time collaboration. So this was the time when, if GitHub was sort of building collaboration for source code, Google was building collaboration for Office documents and so on. But APIs, even though they are inherently collaborative, they didn't really have a strong collaboration play. And that's essentially how Postman started. So I think for 6 months or so, we were working out of our individual homes and so on. And then I think the first office we got, which was the first proper Postman office, was I think November or December of 2014, which is when we started hiring, expanding the team, and it's been a phenomenal journey ever since then. And the team that we've had, the the user community that we have had the privilege of working with, I think all of that has contributed to where we are now.
Yeah, and I've been at that original gangster first Postman office.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we have a ton of questions. I have more questions about your integrations, because you're the head of product, but you're also the head of the integrations. And so I do want to get back to that, but in the meantime, people are here and they're asking questions. Let's start with an easy one. How about, okay? All right, so, oh my gosh, there's too many, I'm scrolling past some of the questions that you're asking, and it was, okay. So there's a few smattering of questions similar to this one from Tirth. Does Postman give internship opportunities? There's somebody that asks, are we hiring software engineers? What is our headcount? What are we hiring? Do we have open positions?
Absolutely. So our headcount across the org is about 400 now. We are hiring engineers across all teams. I think on our website, you'll find an updated list of the exact roles that we're looking for. But I think one thing that I'll mention is that a lot of our hiring has been from the community as well. So I think we're, even outside of the hiring space, we're always open to having constant interactions with developers who are interested in the API space. And we have enough examples, especially in the first few years, where that was a really great source of hiring. I mean, we're constantly open. We do internships as well. Engineering, product, all of these are roles that we'll constantly be hiring for as we expand.
And somebody in the line of questioning, somebody's like, do you have a campus opportunity? We also have a student expert program, so that's on our website. Check that out. Let's go ahead. We're doing a quick fire. LinkedIn users asking why Postman started off as a Chrome extension. Why are you discouraging users from the Chrome extension?
So I think what we realized was that the set of problems that we wanted to solve with Postman, I think, which weren't limited maybe to the individual developer workflow, but we wanted to look at how different personas can sort of work with APIs in a more seamless way, how entire organizations can sort of get enhanced value from the internal API ecosystem that they have. And I think for all of those things, we saw that the Chrome path, which was exceptionally useful for us in the first few years, it was really easy to develop, to distribute. But I think as we expanded the set of use cases that we wanted to support, we just thought that it was time to make a clean break where we could have more control over the app. I mean, the entire Chrome Web Store ecosystem, it was really instrumental. But I think we're just at a point now where we want to expand in terms of capabilities of the Postman app itself, in terms of what personas use it, and I think all of those were the reasons why we are sort of moving out of the Chrome ecosystem.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue here. Does Postman make any other products? If not, is it planning to? So Himanshu, I'm guessing you're probably using Postman as an API client. And honestly, like, we have a marketing webpage that shows the full breadth of the API development lifecycle, but it's a lot. It's a lot. If you had to nutshell summary, TLDR, what is Postman today? It's not an API client. It's a little bit more than that.
Yep.
How would you explain Postman?
Sure. So Postman, as you mentioned, right, has evolved over the years. I think we've grown in terms of the capabilities of what the Postman product can do. And the way we see it now is that Postman is the complete API platform. And what that means is that we're solving for API workflows of different personas, right, where we aren't just limited to developers, but we're seeing that people in security, people in product management, people in sales, all of these other personas that were, say 4 or 5 years ago, people did not think of as API stakeholders. All of them are beginning to be a lot more interested in APIs and have a say in how the API ecosystem evolves. So all of those personas are, what we want to solve for. The other problem space that we are looking at solving with this API platform product is that the term API is ill-defined. I mean, obviously it's application programming interface and so on, but what developers mean, what different people mean when they say API, I think that question is still unanswered. And that's the question that we really want to get to the heart of. because APIs can mean everything from the source code that actually parse the API to the actual interface to the instance where it's hosted, to the way producers and consumers interact, and all of that is part of what people should think of when they use the term API. So I think with the API platform product, we are looking to streamline all of those workflows for all of the new personas that exist around APIs. And I think one thing that Joyce, you alluded to earlier is the fact that Postman solves different aspects of the API development lifecycle, from API design to development to API documentation, and all these stages will happen for every iteration of the API. So all of those are capabilities within the API platform. I think one way we're thinking about it is that Postman is one product. And with Postman, you are able to sort of exploit all of the capabilities we offer across the API lifecycle.
Yeah, I've met a bunch of folks that the folks that are calling in for this AMA are probably, I would say, mainly engineers, maybe some testers, but I've met so many people that are in non-technical roles that are using Postman pretty sophisticatedly too.
That's right.
Okay, so yes, we are taking questions from all platforms, so go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. There are a bunch of questions, so I'm kind of just scanning them and picking some out. Let's see. So Yash is asking, can we bring Postman to mobile users using apps built on Flutter?
Yeah, I'm not entirely clear on what the intent is, but I think one interesting Postman product release that we did last year was enabling all of the Postman capabilities purely on the web. And one of the incentives for that was that internally, all of us, we were always on our app, obviously, and we wanted access to that on our phones as well. And I think that's one use case that the Postman on the web product really enables. I think one more adjacent thing that I can address is that the integrations piece that you spoke about earlier, we are looking at expanding that so that the data that Postman has, the capabilities that Postman has, they can be sort of extended to apps that might live on other platforms, including Android and iOS, for example. So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers the question as it stands.
Yeah, I had a friend that was doing a Postman challenge from an iPad.
Yeah,
and
we can love those.
It worked.
Yeah, I think after years of just using Postman on a proper laptop, just seeing it work on an iPad, it was a great experience.
Yeah. Okay, and then we do have a comment, a plea from D Trouble. Postman, please focus on GraphQL.
We're on it. We're absolutely on it. I think one of the focus areas for us going forward is to make sure that we support other protocols as well. There is a highly concerted effort that we are doing to align to that objective, and GraphQL is obviously high on the list. GraphQL as a protocol.
And D Trouble follows up about introspection.
Yep. Yeah. So I think what we've noticed is that every protocol that exists at the various layers. So you might have something like GraphQL, the application layer. GraphQL, WebSockets, GRPC. All of these protocols that exist in slightly different layers of the entire stack, and we need to figure out what's the ideal workflow in Postman for each of them. But yeah, introspection is obviously high on the priority list for us, and you should see updated GraphQL support very, very soon.
And I heard you say gRPC. Elizabeth is asking plans on the roadmap to support gRPC services.
Yep. So as I said, all these new protocols, that's a big area of focus for us. I think from all of the user communications that we have, the breadth of the API ecosystem is such that all of these technologies, which were niche maybe a few years ago, now are really important for developers, small teams, enterprises to really complete their internal API story. So all of these are things that we have to focus on. Absolutely.
And then we have a question from Faraz. What would be the correct approach to collaborate with Postman and release our API? So I'm guessing you're talking about a public API that you want to post in the API network.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what Postman is built for is a team that is API first, which means that you think of your your API as a singular product with its producers, consumers, problem statements, constraints. And if you start from that API first worldview, Postman helps you through the entire development workflow that you might have, from defining what your API is supposed to do to development and so on. Earlier this year, we released a few integrations with version control systems that sort of integrate how your code repository works with your API or Open API spec and so on. And I think all of those things put together are, in our view, the workflow that API first team should adopt. And as you mentioned, if you want to sort of put your API out there for consumers to see, we have an API network that's accessible to everyone. And I think a lot of really popular, externally available APIs are on the network. So that should be something that you should look into.
Yeah, it's self-serve, and this stream is normally not talking to somebody and asking questions, but it's normally live coding, and we usually consume public APIs. We have special projects, so check out streams on different days. And here's a question. You've already talked about collaboration a little bit. So Startup Santana is asking, from the startup's point of view, shed some light on the technical collaboration. So maybe talk a little bit more about smaller teams or projects that you might be working on.
Right, absolutely. I think one very interesting pattern that we've observed is that the way our technology evolves is highly related to the way our teams are structured, and the way people self-organize into teams. The communication patterns that exist within teams, they are greatly reflected in the way the output is, right? And so we've tried to sort of use that to our advantage, where we're saying that if Postman is sort of advocating API first and encouraging API first and enabling API first, we need to embrace that internally. And dogfooding Postman has been like a heavy priority for us from day one. Right? That's one advantage we had as well, because all of us were developing APIs, building and consuming APIs. We had like first-hand experience of the pain points in the API development lifecycle, and I think all of that input has gone into the Postman product today. And we try to make sure that the API interfaces that we expect from the ideal API, those interfaces exist within our engineering org as well. And one of the challenges that we see as the org scales, right, as we scale from 3 to 50 to now about 300 strong engineering org, there are often decisions that you need to make at certain inflection points when the communication structure within the org changes. So we've had to do that. I think now for the last year and a half, we have arrived at this structure where we have teams of approximately 5 to 15 engineers, developers, QA, security, who are aligned on one sort of user-facing problem statement. And I think that approach aligns well with the way we think of APIs and the way we build APIs internally as well.
Yeah, and kind of along that line of questioning, Sarab is saying, explain the revenue model of Postman. Do we make money?
We do, Joyce. So I think the way it's evolved is that Postman started out as a tool without any paid feature set. It was a tool adopted by individual developers in their own workflows. And that's always going to be there, right? I think we have this internal commitment that use case always needs to be available. And the way we have seen our growth from the business side and the revenue side has been that developers sort of learn and start to feel the importance of Postman in their individual workflows. I think 2 years ago we enabled free trials, so developers working in small teams, either on their individual projects or with even small teams within a bigger organization, they can see the benefits that the Postman collaboration and the API platform really has for their workflows and their teams' workflows. And the plans that we have, in fact, we updated our pricing structure not too long ago, and what we've tried to do there is align the way the plans work with the updated value that we think teams get as they expand. So the way we see Postman expanding in an org is that the value that the organization gets from Postman expands non-linearly with the number of users using Postman, because we're all about collaboration. Essentially for enterprises, what we feel is that Postman adopted across the org solves the API discovery problem, solves the collaboration problem, solves the multiple tools problem, solves the onboarding problem for developers, because everyone has to interface with APIs irrespective of what team they're in. So I think all of those features are what we want to make most of our revenue from, and in the goal that we have of enabling API first across the world, we do want to make sure that individual developers or small teams, they have access to almost all of the Postman capabilities in the API platform that we can offer.
Yeah, that's an interesting breakdown of how you do pricing for a startup and how you continue to evolve pricing. And for the question was about startups, or the earlier question was about startups, but we see huge honking companies that have tiny little teams of development. And so it's a good way to try it out. Okay, so rapid fire. Rajneesh is asking, what's the reason behind the Postman name? Oh, I wasn't expecting this one. No, this is a good story.
That's a fun question. So I think the name Postman was like a play on the HTTP verb post, because Postman's origins were purely as an API client where you could send individual HTTP requests, where we sort of said that this is an easier way, instead of using curl, where all of those complicated flags are things that you need to remember, Postman can help you solve that use case. And get and post, all of these are very basic constructs in the HTTP protocol. So the name Postman was just a play on that we help you with all of your HTTP related activities. And I think one more way of thinking about it is that sort of APIs connect different teams and transfer information from one team to the other, which is what is reflected in the Postman name as well. So
yeah, delivering your post from house to house. Here's an interesting question. Tushar is asking, how is Postman going to contribute to the Web3 world? What is it, and how is Postman going to be contributing?
Well, that term has really taken off in the last few months.
Yeah.
I think the way we think about it is that, irrespective of how the nomenclature evolves, there will be fundamental changes at the technical level as well. There'll be new protocols being introduced. And our long-term goal is clear, right? We are saying that we want to ease the connected software development process. We want to create net new developers in the world. We want to enable API first. And I think one aspect of that is constantly looking at how the ecosystem is evolving, because what we've seen is that technologies can grow really, really fast, right? I mean, if you look at how GraphQL has exploded over the years, that'll give you an idea of what might happen with other protocols, other technologies that exist. So yeah, I mean, I think the answer that I'd have there is, we are keeping a close eye on the ecosystem, figuring out how that relates to APIs and connected software, what are the protocols and standards that evolve, and yeah, we'll try to make sure that we are as ahead of the curve as we can be.
So what are all the protocols and standards that Postman is used for today? Because I feel like everyone's like, oh, it's a REST client or an HTTP client.
Yep. Yeah. So I think standards exist in many different layers, right? So HTTP is obviously one protocol that we support. WebSockets is something we're working on as well. You have different protocols or standards with which you can define APIs. So you can have Open API, WSDL. All of these are different ways of describing what your API can do and how it can be used. Postman supports multiple standards across the stack. We have some support for GraphQL, which we released maybe 2 years ago. But as somebody mentioned, introspection, etc., are features that we're working on. On the schema side, we support Open API, RAML, WADL, WSDL, and so on. And we are constantly expanding support there as well. And then with our focus on expanding to other protocols, GRPC, WebSockets, they'll be a bigger part of Postman as we go along. And obviously the list there is huge. I mean, we've had requests for HTTP2, for example, more support for SOAP. I think we're constantly looking at how these technologies are evolving, what our users and customers say, and I think all of that is a very strong aspect of the product roadmap that we create.
Okay, question from LinkedIn user. Is there a way to directly connect to SQL database to query for data validation? If not, is there something that's planned for in the future? And I would kind of recouch that question, like how does Postman connect to databases and how do you do data validation?
Sure. So I think our way of looking at this is that, again, going back to the API first way of thinking, that the fact that data comes from a SQL database or database backed by any other technology is sort of one step away from the APIs that Postman works with. And for us, the way we think about it is that the API is the source of whatever it is you want to validate. So one of the earliest capabilities of the Postman platform was the ability to assert API behavior, and that capability has continued to evolve to this day. And that's actually one of the strongest use cases that all of our users have, right? I want to make sure that my API is up. I want to make sure that my API responds correctly. I want to make sure that my API responds within a stipulated limit. And all of those things are what you can do from the Postman API platform. And a lot of those APIs might internally be fetching data from SQL databases or any other type, but Postman is focused more on the API itself. And one strong focus area for us is how we can expand the type of validation that Postman does.
Yeah, and we have a flavor of question that's around internships and recruiting, hiring, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to drop a link to our careers page. Check it out. If you want Abhijit to refer you, just go ahead and message him directly. An interesting question here. So Abhijit, you're the head of product. And you focus a lot on integrations. You've done a lot of architecting before at the company. This question is from Shrey. How important is design in Postman? So such a broad question.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a great question and something that I'd like to expand on. I think one of the early realizations we had when we were sort of exploring what the future of Postman could be was that because tools at the time were generally adopted because it was adopted by the org and developers had to use it. We found, and this was sort of mirrored in all the user conversations that we had, was that the developer experience, which is the ease of use, the ease of onboarding, discoverability, and so on. All of these were concerns that a lot of users felt were not the most important in the tools that they used. And around the time when Postman started, 2014 and a few years before that, one trend that happened in the industry was that developers started to become more empowered to take their own decisions around what tools to use, what technologies to use, when to buy, when to upgrade, and so on. And that meant that we had to sort of compete. We had to make sure that in spite of the expanding capabilities that Postman had, the ease of use, the fact that it should feel like a consumer product where onboarding is given importance. All of that was key, right? Because we knew that that was pretty much an existential concern for us because Postman has always grown organically, right? We've been adopted by developers first, and then developers form teams, and they hopefully upgrade. But because we're developer first, and a large or most Postman users use Postman for free, right? The API platform bit for free. The product design bit is essential. And by product design, I just don't mean how the product looks, but the entire experience that users have, right from discovering that something called Postman exists, to making their first request, to seeing what value that Postman can bring, and hopefully getting to a stage where their usage of Postman mirrors the growth in the API complexities that they are facing, right? So I think all of that is key. And in fact, the first hire that we made was not an engineer, but was a product designer. And this was because all of the new features that we were building, we wanted to make sure that they fit in well. There was a long-term plan as to how it would look in the app, how it would feel in the app.
Yeah.
And I think that team has been a key part of all product and even engineering decisions to this day.
We have a compliment. We have a compliment from Akash. Yeah, complimenting Postman, has a beautiful design which they keep updating. And to your point, we have a ton of people that come in and do one thing, but there's so much more. So how do you show them that, but not get in the way of them doing one thing? And then some people are in every day, and some people are in like once a month. So it's like you have to accommodate so many of those different perspectives. Okay, so let's go to this one right here. Startup Santana again saying, any dedicated services on WebRTC, MobileRTC, real-time communication for a massive video chat application? Whoa. I'm curious, Startup Santana, what startup are you working at? But maybe you can chime in on that.
We'd love to know as well. I think all of these protocols are things that we would obviously want to get to at some point. I think there's a huge space of protocols that we haven't truly explored yet. Once you start exploring that, you see just how deep it goes, right? I mean, there are protocols specific to the auto industry, the healthcare industry, the finance industry, and so on. And all of those protocols, streaming protocols for video and so on. I think we need to think carefully about how that plays in with the entire API world. I don't think we have sort of formalized our thoughts too much on this bit yet. I think from a lot of our user conversations, what we've seen is that video streaming, audio streaming, etc., is a little separated from the application APIs that you might have. But yes, I mean, in the API first world, all of this is an API, right? And we aren't sort of saying that JSON and XML is the only thing that an API can move around. So yes, I mean, at some point we really hope to solve this problem as well, because an API is just a simplified way to interact with something else. Right, and the simpler the interface of the API is, the easier your consumers will find it. The more consumers you can get, and the more creativity can be built out from your API. So I think all of these are technologies that we'll certainly get to at some point.
Yeah, I mean, support for GraphQL, for WebSockets, all of that was just driven by people asking for it. And then if it's close enough to what we already have, then it makes sense. But if it's over here, then it might take us a while to get over there. Question from Bharadwaj, using which tech stack is what's our tech stack? Tech stack.
So that has evolved a little bit over the years. So when Postman was on the Chrome store, it was entirely HTML, JS, CSS. The app that we use now, we use a platform called Electron, which has been super useful for us. It helped us sort of maintain our development speed, while enabling Postman to use native OS capabilities as well. And the app is sort of still built on JS. Our server side is primarily on Node. We have a few services that are in Go, PHP, and so on. But I think Node is the primary language that we use. Outside of our product teams, the data team has like a pretty solid and evolved stack of their own, which again uses a combination of multiple technologies. But I think the tech stack that influences what users see on the client and the server, most of that is Node with a bit of PHP and Go thrown in here and there.
It's like a recipe. All right, another question from Elizabeth. How is Postman tested? For example, when a new feature is introduced, have you found any performance limitations? So a question about our testing process.
Right. So again, I think the QA testing process is something that we've had to constantly evolve as the team has grown, as the Postman product has grown, as the stakes have grown. The state we're at now is, we expect each team to own their sort of part of the product end to end, and that includes being responsible for quality, security, and performance. We do have a QA team, and the way we sort of work with them is that they're responsible to help us do quality in an improved way, right? To make sure that we're using the best approaches, tools, workflows, etc. But the responsibility of quality falls with the team. And I think one major advantage we get there is that the people who are developing, have an incentive on the other side as well, but also they have the most product context, right? I think one reason we actively chose this approach is that having an independent QA team means that the people who are thinking about the problem space sort of they are building for use cases 1, 2, and 3, but the QA person might not have that that same overlap. And we wanted to make sure that the end-to-end ownership of any particular product feature is maintained by the same team. So that's the way it's been working for the last 2 years, and I think it's worked out fairly well. I think in the beginning we might have had a few sort of adjustment issues, but over time people realized that this approach increases productivity. It reduces sort of transfer time between teams and so on, and I think it just helps everyone. In terms of performance, I think that's an interesting area as well, because the growth that we've seen in the Postman product, that has happened in terms of the Postman feature set, it's happened in terms of number of users, it's happened in terms of how much individual users do in Postman, right? The number of collections and APIs that they have. So we have expanded on all three fronts, and it's been something where we've constantly iterated here and there. I think we've faced issues where some user or some customer would say, this specific use case that I have, which we thought was not something that a lot of people would use Postman for, was actually being used by quite a few people. So those are specific concerns that we have worked to address over time. But one big priority for us this year is performance. So we are looking at performance at an entire product level, and there are multiple frameworks and tools that we have to address this. And I think across individual teams and across the entire product, I think we should be seeing significant performance improvements really soon.
So we have separate QA, separate security. We actually have a lot of testers, yep. But the responsibility lies with the teams themselves. Absolutely. And testers can consult, but they're not going to be testing.
Yep.
Okay, very nice. Question here I actually had questions of my own, but like the questions are coming in pretty fast and furious. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We'll get to it. Akash is asking, are you aware of a tool named Postwoman? It's now renamed, but are you aware of it? And what are your thoughts on it? Like, yeah.
I think we do keep an eye on how the ecosystem is evolving. I think one signal for us in terms of product validation is, if specific parts of the Postman product are sort of built elsewhere, that's a signal that use case that we set out to solve is felt by a number of other folks as well. So I think we're seeing a state where Postman is this broader API platform, and we'll always have and obviously in the industry we want to see increased competition, because that's how everyone evolves, that's how everyone improves. But for specific use cases, API documentation, API monitoring, I think there are specific products that exist in those verticals that we're looking at. Postman was an example of one product on the API testing space, right, which was essentially the API client functionality. And I mean, I don't think there's too much overlap in terms of how our roadmap is affected by that. But I think the way we look at it is that there shouldn't be any major technological shift that we are missing. And also, as I said, the fact that this problem space has been validated by so many other people, that's a helpful signal as well.
Yeah, there's so many Postman knockoffs. I kind of take it as a compliment, because it's like, okay, you want Postman, but like with a blue button. Yeah. So like make your own. Great. Okay, question about what sort of machine or deep learning algorithms does Postman use, without giving anything away? And is it to improve the UX or to improve the service at the back end?
Right. So I think we've started experimenting with this a little bit. I think one type of problem that we're looking to solve is that Postman sort of Postman is used by so many people to store so many APIs, and we have all of this information, and there's a lot that we can give back in terms of helping API discovery at an org-wide level, for example. And all of those are problems where ML could really help, because even within one specific organization that's using Postman, there's a huge amount of data to churn through, right? If it's an API that's used by external consumers, you might have millions of requests that are hitting that API, and we need to have a way to figure out how all of that information can be used to sort of enhance the value that people get from the Postman API platform. So I think all of these technologies are what we look at, and the entire recommendation space is, I think, one area where we could use that. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
That's interesting. Yeah. You're when you're flipping through Netflix and it's like, oh, you might like this too. You can do it with
How does it know?
APIs.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So this question from Tushar: does Postman have some competition in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are different types of competition that we look at. I think one thing that we spoke about earlier is competition in specific workflows that Postman also solves for. So there are tools that do API documentation. There are tools that do API monitoring, for example. One other concern, or one other thing that we think of as competition, is medium to large companies building their internal tooling. And we've seen this trend at a lot of companies, right? And almost all companies do that to a certain extent. A few companies go a really long way, and that's actually the biggest competition for us, because our thought is that um, companies that are not in the API business should focus, and should be able to focus on what their core business is. And Postman, as an API platform, as a tool, or as a product that solves your API use cases for you, we should be able to adapt and adjust to whatever unique use cases you have. So I think that's the biggest competition that we see. That's also one of the strongest sort of feedback loops into the product roadmap that we have. How can we enable Postman to be used in the vast and growing ecosystem, right? Because in a big org, acquisitions have happened, multiple technical decisions have been taken. So the ecosystem that is present in an org is very varied, and we need to make sure that Postman integrates with the tools, the workflows, the use cases, the constraints of all organizations. So I think that's our single biggest internal understanding of competition.
Yeah, I've talked to large companies before that spend years and millions building their own internal Postman,
Mm-hmm.
and then afterwards they have a hard time getting people to adopt it because all of their developers are using Postman already. So it's kind of like they have to migrate them off to whatever they built. All right. Question from Rajneesh: is there any plan for a mobile app? You have mobile web now. Now I want mobile app.
I mean, we're looking at what sort of usage patterns we are seeing there. I mean, there isn't anything immediate that we're looking at. I think what we've seen is that the support for Postman on the web that enabled a lot of use cases that people wanted to use, where you aren't limited to executing requests, but everything else, right? API documentation, seeing how your API is evolving, doing API reviews, all of those tasks are things that we internally use Postman on the web on our phones for. And I think it's been a real shift in sort of how pervasive Postman can be. So an app is something from from an engineering or product perspective. We'll obviously look at if we feel that use case is strong enough. But for most of the use cases that Postman had, and I mean, technically even the request execution is something that you can do purely from the web. So yeah, I think all of those use cases are enabled, and we'd be happy to hear feedback around what use cases you have around different form factors, and what hindrances you face.
Yeah, Rajneesh, are you at the bus stop and you're trying to fire post calls?
When's my bus going to come?
Or maybe you're looking at monitor results. I would like to see testing results. That would be helpful. Okay. Question from Shruti: did you ever think your college project would be a megastar one day for developers around the globe? So, I mean, what were you thinking back when you decided to spend so much time working with Avinav and Ankit?
So I think the answer to this question is yes and no. I think we did have a belief that APIs are going to be the future, and the long-term goal that we had was this. That we are able to make API development easier for developers. We are able to bring in more personas into the API world. I mean, in hindsight, I think my honest take would be that it would be hard to quantify what our initial assumptions were now. I think when you're working on a daily or weekly basis, it's hard to see how far we've come. But I think every so often, when you look back, you see the huge amount of impact that you've created, and it sort of puts everything in perspective, which is really helpful. So yeah.
I think I saw a question back at the very, very beginning that was, when is Postman going to go public? Blink twice. Blink twice.
Yeah. So I think for us, the only goal that we have is, making APIs easier for everyone to use, to consume, increasing the number of net new developers in the world. And on the business finance side, I think the ecosystem and landscape is changing so fast that every 6 months we sort of need to reevaluate what our long-term growth plan is going to be, right? I mean, hopefully that is not something that changes too often. But yeah, I mean, I think all other that isn't what we consider as a goal, right? I think as long as we have more users being able to use APIs faster, that's the only thing we're concerned about.
Yeah, that's a good PC answer. Okay. Question from Raj Kumar: what are new features that will be available in the next major release? So when is the next major release coming, and what will be in it?
Yeah. So we're still working on the when part. I think a few things that we're looking at. In fact, I think one thing that I'll mention is our major release in 2021, which was the entire API platform product, which was something that sort of brought together features around how code repositories can integrate with APIs, how different tools, across CI/CD, application performance monitoring, API gateways, all of these tools can sort of work with Postman to sort of streamline the API workflow. So that sort of effort will continue going forward as well. We do want to expand the number of integrations we have because, as I said, the ecosystem is vast and growing. And speaking to all of our users and a few of the questions that we've seen as well, there's a great need that's felt to make sure that Postman can play well with all of the tools that exist. So I think that will be one strong area of focus for us going forward. I think the other thing that we're looking at is expanding the set of protocols that we support. So I think across all of those, right, the use cases that Postman can be used for an individual developer or for a team, those are the things that we're looking to grow. But yeah, I mean, continuing work on the API platform and expanding the core capabilities of the Postman API client, right, in terms of protocols, etc. I think those are things that we can look forward to.
Yeah, and I think we have a stream coming up in 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember, but it's going to be recapping all the stuff that hit in 2021. So that'll be a fun one, and we're doing giveaways all of December. Oh my God, it's December already. So make sure you tune into those streams. So question from Arjun that I think Arjun's asking: are there any certifications provided by Postman? I wasn't able to pull up the link right now, but if you look for we do have badges of completion that we offer for different coursework on Badger, B-A-D-G-R. I'm having a stroke. Okay, yeah, so go ahead and look up those types of certifications. Akash is asking, any plans on introducing stress testing or load testing?
Yeah, this has been a feature request for a while. I think the way we'll think about it is that it's essentially a decision in terms of building versus integrating, because the way Postman has evolved is that developers were always using some tool for all of these use cases that we have, and Postman has tried to streamline them. And then after that, we say, given all of the workflows and data that Postman has access to, how can we make Postman the best API documentation tool that exists? How can we make Postman the best API monitoring tool that exists? So I think we'll follow a similar approach for API performance testing or API load testing as well. We do want to introduce, or at least start by introducing a few integrations around this space, because any team that has internal or external APIs that see heavy usage, performance testing is an integral part of that API workflow. So we do need to integrate with that in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, I think we're actively exploring integrations around that. Yeah, happy to hear feedback in terms of what your stress testing use cases are, how that flows into your broader API workflow, what tools you use, etc. So all of these are conversations that we'll have with our user community, and hopefully work on bringing this into Postman as well.
So you're the head of product, but also run all the integrations. How do you decide whether or not you build something natively in Postman
Mhm.
or you integrate with a popular tool. And then, I mean, what is your thought process or decision tree?
But I think there are a number of frameworks that we use. I think the primary goal for us is to make sure that our users' needs are met in accordance with the vision that we have for API first. So if there's something where we see that there is enough of a niche that has been created, enough of value that has been created, and things like version control, CI/CD, those fit the bill. Where things like GitHub, Bitbucket, etc., have been around for years, developers have embraced them, and I think there's so much value that GitHub provides, and we see that internally as an org as well. There's so much value that these tools provide that our users are better served with integrations with them. I think there are some other parts of the API workflow which have not been completely solved, right? API documentation, in most cases, what we've seen is either teams build it themselves, which is what we're trying to sort of help them solve, or it's sort of a way to represent your open API file, right? And at Postman, we think we can improve on that, right? We have sort of the API definition, we have collections, we have all of the users who are collaborating in real time on the API. And if we feel that we can use all of that to create a better API documentation product, I think that's the time we say that this is something we really need to invest in. And integrations will continue to grow. I think irrespective of what the Postman sort of native features are, integrations will continue to grow because we have to, as I said, fit into the workflow the teams already have. And we constantly see examples where people see value in 3 out of the 4 things that Postman provides, but after that it's there's this one important blocker that prevents me from getting maximal value out of the platform. And I think all of those cases are examples where integrations can really help out.
Yeah. So we're drawing to the near the end of our time together. I didn't get to ask any of my questions, but very good questions from the audience.
Yeah.
I will just conclude with one final question that somebody had. This is from Abraham. How are you doing, Abhijit? How are you doing?
Well, I think it's been an interesting 2 years for everyone. I think on the personal front, I think the last 2 years we moved houses. So I think all of that combined with the different environment of working from home, it's been something that we took a bit of getting used to. I think the same is true of the broader Postman team as well. I think for the first time, we have a situation where there are so many people across the org who haven't met in person, right? And we're trying to change that slowly, as and when it's safe to reconvene in a physical space. But I think it's been great. It's been a great learning experience as well. And even though the last 2 years have just flown by, I think Postman as a product has evolved quite a bit. And the way you sort of use that in your decision making, the way you need to evolve as the Postman team grows, as the user base grows. I think all of those are things that I think I've had to sort of relearn a bit over the last 1.5 to 2 years. So yeah, but otherwise it's going great.
It keeps you young.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you for a shout out. So okay. I'll give you at least 2 minutes to think about that. I will give a heads up, a couple announcements. We have 2 more streams for the year, I believe, before we close our season 2. Next week, we have another blindfold challenge, and we have support engineer Vaishnavi is going to be putting, I believe, Sean and Arlemy in the hot seat. That's a really fun format. So she has a creative twist on it. So she's going to be, it's going to be another live coding challenge, but it's a secret surprise for Sean and Arlemy. And then in 2 weeks, Arlemy and myself will be back. And we will be doing the season 2 closer, 2021 closer. We'll go over all the stuff that hit in 2021. We'll also probably be playing some embarrassing clips. I'm guessing. I don't really know how this is going to go. We'll be doing some things, and we're also having giveaways. So make sure you tune into the stream. And for this particular stream, you showed up. You asked some really great questions. The way we're going to be doing a giveaway, we have I think T-shirts. Socks. I can't remember exactly what we have, but we have some swag giveaways. So go ahead and tweet a screenshot of this stream. I don't know. I was trying to think of a way to do this in a fair fashion. But go ahead. But in the next hour, tweet at GetPostman. If you don't have a Twitter account, create a Twitter account, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to pick some swag winners. But go ahead and tweet at GetPostman, and we will pick a couple of random winners. So let's close with community shout outs. If you have anything that you want to give a shout out to, go ahead and do it in the chat too. If you have a video that you posted, if you have a tutorial, if you have a course that you like, if you have a book, do you read? Go ahead and post that in the chat and share with our community some things that they should know about. What is your community shout out before we log off?
Good. I think I'll do two. So I think one would be for the Postman team. I think they've been sort of great, especially over the last 2 years with the difficulties that we have seen, having to adjust to new ways of working. I think a lot of Postman was sort of built on the fact that everyone was in the same physical space and we could interact, and that led to a highly effective, I think, degree of productivity within teams. But I think we've been able to maintain quite a bit of that as we've grown. So I think huge kudos to the Postman team. I think one book that stands out.
Of course, you have to be bragging that you read.
Absolutely, it's that. So I have an unhealthy obsession with aviation. So I think one book that we give out to new employees as they join is the Wright brothers biography, right? And as soon as I saw that, I knew I had to get my hands on it and finish it. And I think what I like about biographies in general, I mean, whether they're stories of people or even products or companies, is that you always end up underappreciating how much work goes into things, right? Whether it's how much work like an individual person did or previous work that they've built on. I think it just gives you a whole new level of appreciation for all of the trials and tribulations that people go through for something that all of us take for granted every day, right? And obviously, given my interest, it was an area that I really enjoyed reading about. So shout out to the Wright brothers book as well.
Is that what it's called?
It's called the Wright brothers, I think. Yes, that's the title.
Okay. That's kind of interesting. I didn't realize that you were interested in aviation, and that's not birds, that's planes, right?
That's planes.
Okay.
That's right.
And so you're just saying, like, by the time it gets to you in your house, it's already kind of packaged. It's been through several iterations, and you really don't see the hard work and some of the wrong turns and like twists and turns that have been taken. So
Absolutely.
Interesting. The Wright brothers book. The Wright brothers.
Yep.
Okay. With that, thank you so much for joining us for this AMA. I know this rapid fire interrogation maybe wasn't that enjoyable, but I had fun.
No,
so
it was great. It
hopefully
was really good to answer all the questions. I think it just serves well to sort of think back through all of these problem statements, all of these questions that everyone had. So yeah, I had a great time. And thanks, Joyce.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.